Hello students, this is your economics teacher Ayanar. I hope you are well and utilizing the time wisely.
In the previous class, you learned about Chapter 5, Market Structure and Pricing. Today, you are going to learn about Chapter 6, Distribution Analysis. First, we will discuss meaning of distribution, kinds of distribution of income, marginal productivity theory of distribution, and rent and its theories. Students, watch this video very carefully till the end. Fine, let us enter into the topics. First, we will discuss meaning of distribution and its kinds. Students, take the page number 121. The factors of production wise land, labor, capital and organization are involved in production. The theory of functional distribution deals with how the relative price of these factors of production are determined. The theory of factor price is popularly known as the theory of distribution. Interesting aspect here in the fact that large number of ideas has emerged and various factors have been identified in the economist, contributing to the development of economic science. Meaning of distribution. Distribution means division of income among the four factors of production in the terms of rent to landlords, wages to laborers, interest to capital, and profit to entrepreneur. Wealth is produced by the combination of land, labor, capital, and organization, and it is distributed in the form of rent, wages, interest, and profits. In economics, we are not much interested in personal distribution. That is, we do not analyze how it is distributed among different persons in the society. But we are interested in functional distribution, as the four factors of production perform different function in production. We have to reward them. Secondly, you are going to learn about kinds of distribution of income. Personal distribution. Personal distribution is the distribution of national income among the individuals. Second, functional distribution. Functional distribution means the distribution of income among the four factors of production, namely land, labor, capital, and organization for their services in production process. Next, you are going to learn about marginal productivity theory of distribution. Introduction. Marginal productivity theory of distribution was developed by Clark's, Wicksteed, and Walras. The marginal productivity theory of distribution is the general theory of distribution. The theory explains how prices of various factors of production are determined under conditions of perfect competition. It emphasizes that any variable factor must obtain a reward equal to its marginal product. There is no fundamental differences between the mechanism of determinations of factor prices and the top prices of commodities. Factor prices are determined in market under the force of supply and demand. But there is one difference. While the demand for commodities is direct demand, the demand for factors of production is derived demand. For example, there will be demand for workers engaged in construction industry only when there is demand for housing. This theory explains how the price of various factors of production are determined. This theory explains how rent, wages, interest, and profits are determined. This theory is also known as general theory of distribution or national dividend theory of distribution. Next, assumption. This theory is based on the following assumption. First, all the factors of production are homogeneous. Second, factors of production can be substituted for each other. Third, there is perfect competition both in the factor market and product market. Fourth, there is perfect mobility of factors of production. 5. There is full employment of factors. 6. This theory is applicable only in the long run. 7th assumption, the entrepreneur aim at profit maximization. 8th, there is no government intervention in fixing the price of a factor. 9th, there is no technological changes. Explanation of the theory. According to the marginal productivity theory of distribution, The price or the reward for any factors of production is equal to the marginal productivity of that factor. In short, each factor is rewarded according to its marginal productivity. On the other hand, according to the marginal productivity theory of distribution, in a perfect competitive market, each factor will be paid a price is equal to the value of its physical product. Though the theory is applicable to all the factors of production, we may illustrate it with reference to labor. A firm will go on employing more and more units of labor until the price of factor is equal to the value of the marginal product. In other words, each factor will be rewarded according to its marginal productivity. The marginal productivity is equal to the value of the additional product which an employer gets when he employs an additional unit of that factor. We assume that the supply of all other factors remains constant. The marginal product of a factors of production means the addition made to the total product by employment of an additional unit of that factor. The marginal product may be expressed as MPP, VMP and MRP. MPP, marginal physical product. The marginal physical product of a factor is the increment in the total product obtained by the employment of an additional units of that factor. Second, VMP, value of marginal product. The value of marginal product is obtained by multiplying the marginal physical product of the factor by the price of product. Symbolically, VMP is equal to MPP into price. Third, marginal revenue product or MRP. The marginal revenue product of the factor is the increment in the total revenue which is obtained by the employment of an additional unit of that factor. MRP is equal to MPP into MR. Statement of the theory: an employer employs a factors of production because it is productive. So the price he wants to pay for the factors depend upon its productivity. The greater the productivity of a factor, the higher will be its reward. If the price of a factor of production is less than its marginal revenue product, the employers will use more of this factor because his profit will be increased. When more of a factor is employed, its marginal revenue product diminishes. But the employers will gain by using additional units of the factor until the marginal revenue product of the factor is equal to its price. The employer's profit will be maximum at this point. Beyond the point, the marginal revenue product is less than the price of the factor. Hence, employer will suffer loss when he uses more of the factor. Therefore, the conclusion is that the employer will so adjust the price of the factors of production so as to equalize the marginal revenue product of that factors. In short, the marginal productivity theory of distribution stated that first, the price of a factors of production depends upon its productivity. Second, the price of a factor is determined by and will be equal to marginal revenue product of that factor. Third, under certain conditions, the price of a factor will be equal to both the average and the marginal product of that factor. The marginal productivity theory of distribution can be represented diagrammatically as follows. The diagram 6.1 refers to the factor pricing under perfect competition in the factors market. X-axis represents factor units and Y-axis represents the factor price and revenue product. MRP is the marginal revenue product curve and ARP is the average revenue product curve. AFC is the average factor cost curve and MFC is the marginal factor cost curve. AFC is horizontal under perfect competition and MFC coincide with it. When there is perfect competition in the factor market, the firm is in equilibrium only when MFC is equal to MRP. Hence, in the diagram, the firm reaches equilibrium at point Q by employing ON units of factors and paying OP price, that is NQ, where MFC is equal to MRP. At the point Q, MRP is equal to ARP. The price paid to the factor NQ is also equal to marginal revenue product NQ and average revenue product NQ. This means that there is no exploitation of the factors under perfect competition. Beyond the point Q, no employer will employ factors because after that point, the price paid to the factor is more than marginal revenue product and average revenue product. In diagram 6.2, the factor pricing under imperfect competition is represented. AFC is average factor cost. It represents the price paid to the factors. It increases as the number of factors demanded by the employer increases. As AFC rises, MFC lies above AFC. It represents the marginal cost paid to the factors. At the point Q, MFC is equal to MRP, where the employer attains his maximum profit and so he stops employment of the factors at the point. But the average cost paid is N or SO and the average revenue obtained at NQ or OP. Total revenue obtained in is NQ PQ. Therefore, exploitation per unit of factor is RQ. But the total number of factor is ON. Thus, the total exploitation of factor by the employer is RQ into SR is equal to PQRS, shaded area. Thus, under imperfect competition, factor is exploited at the equilibrium positions. Thus, the productivity of marginal units of a factor determine the rate that is to be paid to all units of the factor. The employers adopt the principles of substitution and combines land, labor and capital in such a way that the cost of production is minimum. Then the reward for each factor is determined by its marginal productivity. The marginal productivity theory of distribution has been used to explain the determinations of rent, wages, interest and profits. That is why it is called general theory of distribution. Criticism. This theory is subject to a few criticism. First, in reality, the factors of production are not homogeneous. Second, in practice, factors cannot be substituted for each other. Third, this theory is applicable only in the long run. It cannot be applied in the short run. Next, we will discuss rent and its theories. In ordinary language, rent refers to any periodic payments made for the use of a good. For example, when we live in someone's house, we pay rent. This rent is contract payment. The contract rent includes, besides the payment made for the use of land, interest on the capital invested in the house, wages and profits. But a classical economist like Ricardo referred by rent to the payment made for the use of agricultural land. Rent arises because of the peculiar characteristics of land. The supply of land is inelastic and it differs in fertility. Rent arises because of differences in fertility. Those lands which are more fertile than other gets rent. Here, rent is the price or reward given for the use of land or house or a machine to the owner. But in economics, rent or economic rent refers to that part of payments made by the tenant to his landlords for the use of land only. Ricardian theory of rent. Ricardian theory of rent is one of the earliest theories of rent. It is named after Ricardo, a great classical economist of the 19th century. According to Ricardo, rent is that portion of the produce of the earth which is paid to be landlord for the use of the original and indestructible powers of the soil. So rent is payment made for the use of land for its original power. Ricardo believed that rent arose on account of differences in the fertility of land. Only superior lands get rent. Rent is a differential surplus. Rent also arises on account of situational advantages. For example, some lands may be nearer to the market. The producer can save a lot of transport cost even if all lands are equally fertile. Lands which enjoy situational advantage will earn rent. Ricardo explains his theory by taking the example of colonization. If some people go and settle down in a place, first they will cultivate the best lands. If more people go and settle down, the demand for land will increase and they will cultivate the second grade lands. The cost of production will go up, so the price of grains in the market must cover the cost of cultivation. In this case, the first grade land will get rent. After some time, if there is increase in population, even third grade land will be cultivated. Now even second grade lands will get rent and the first grade land will get more rent, but the third grade land will not get rent. It is known as no rent land. According to Ricardo, rent is price determined, that is, it is determined by price of the grains produced in the land. He also believed that rent is high because price is high and not the other way round. Ricardo came to the conclusion that rent did not enter price because there are some no rent or marginal lands. As the produce of no rent lands gets a price, Ricardo argued that rent did not enter price. Assumption. Ricardian theory of rent assumes the following assumption. First, land differs in fertility. Second, the law of diminishing returns operates in agriculture. Third, rent depends upon fertility and location of land. Fourth, theory assumes perfect competition. Fifth, it is based on the assumptions of long period. Sixth, there is existence of marginal land and no rent land. Seventh, land has certain original and indestructible powers. Eighth, land is used for cultivation only. Ninth, most fertile land are cultivated first. Statement of the theory with the illustration. Assume that some people go to a newly discovered island and settle down there. There are three grades of land, namely A, B and C in that island. A being most fertile, B is less fertile and C is the least fertile. They will first cultivate all the most fertile land, A grade land available. Since the land is abundant and idle, there is no need to pay rent as long as such best lands are freely available. Given a certain amount of labor and capital, the yield per acre and A grade land is 40 bags of paddy. Suppose another group of peoples goes and settle down in the same island after some time. Hence the demand for agricultural produce will increase. The most fertile land, A grade, alone cannot produce all the food grains that are needed on account of the operations of the law of diminishing returns. So the less fertile lands, B grade, will have to be brought under cultivation in order to meet the growing population. For the same amount of labor and capital employed in A grade land, the yield per acre on B grade land is 30 bags of paddy. The surplus of 10 bags, like 40 minus 30 per acre, appears on A grade land. This is economic rent of A grade land. Suppose yet another group of peoples goes and settle down in the same island. So the least fertile land, C grade, will have to be brought under cultivation. For the same amount of labor and capital, the yield per acre on C grade land is 20 bags of paddy. The surplus of A grade land is now raised to 20 bags, like 40 to 20, and it is the economic rent of A grade land. The surplus of B grade land is 10 bags, 30 minus 20. This is the economic rent of B grade land. In the above illustration, in C grade land, cost of production is just equal to the price of its produce and therefore does not yield any rent, like 20 minus 20. Hence, C grade land is called no rent land or marginal land. Therefore, no rent land or marginal land is the land in which cost of production is equal to price of its produce. The land which yield rent is called intra-marginal land. Therefore, rent indicates the differential advantage of the superior land over the marginal land. Diagrammatic illustration. In diagram 6.3, x-axis represents various grades of land and y-axis represents yield per acre in bags. OA, AB and BC are the A grade, B grade and C grade lands respectively. The applications of equal amount of labor and capital on each of them gives a yield represented by the rectangle standing just above the respective bases. The C grade land is the no rent land. A and B grade lands are intra-marginal lands. The economic rent yielded by A and B grade lands is equal to the shaded area of their respective rectangles. Criticism. Following are the limitations of recording theory of rent. First, the order of cultivation from most fertile to least fertile lands is historically wrong. Second, this theory assumes that rent does not enter into the price, but in reality, rent enter into the price. Next, quasi-rent. According to Marshall, quasi-rent is the income derived from the machine and other appliances for production by man. There are some machines and other man-made appliances, example boats, whose supply may be inelastic in the short run in relation to the demand for them. For example, when there is a large increase in demand for fish during a season, the demand for boats will increase, but you cannot increase their supply overnight. So they will earn some extra income over and above the normal income they receive. Thus Marshall calls quasi-rent. Quasi-rent will disappear when once the supply of boats increases. In short, Marshall introduced the concept of quasi-rent. Factors others than land, say plant and machinery, are fixed in supply during short period. They earn surplus income when demand rises. It is purely temporary as it disappears in long run due to the increase in supply. The quasi-rent is a surplus that a producer receives in the short period over variable cost from the sale of output. Next, the modern theory of rent or demand and supply theory of rent. The classical economist thought that land as a factor of production was different from other factors of production. But modern economists thought that all the factors of production are alike and there is no basic differences between them. Hence, a special theory was rent developed by Ricardo is not necessary. Therefore, economists like John Robinson and Boulding has contributed their ideas for the determinations of rent, which is known as the modern theory of rent. Rent is the differences between the actual earnings of a factors of production and its transfer earnings. The minimum payments that has to be made to a particular factors of production to retain in it its present use is known as transfer earning. To explain the rent, modern economists also make use of the term transfer earnings. Transfer earnings refers to the amount that the factor would earn in its best paid alternative employment. It represents the opportunity cost of its present employment. Any payment in excess of this amount is a surplus above what is necessary to retain the factor in its best paid employment, and so is rent. Thus, any payment in excess of transfer earning is economic rent. If a popular South Indian cinema actor who is normally paid say rupees 40 crores gets an offer to act in a Hindi film rupees 50 crores, his transfer earnings are rupees 40 crores. Rupees 10 crores may be considered as economic rent for acting in the Hindi film. So the main point about the modern theory of rent is that rent is not peculiar to land alone. The rent aspect can be seen in other factor income as well. That's all for today. We will continue in the next class. Finish the assignment by clicking the link below.
Yeah.